What are you looking for here?
Time. I need time to forgive myself. I need to escape. To forget what I did. I'm going. Are you staying or are you coming too?
No. This was the best month of my life. We're all prisoners of ourselves. And from that, there is no possible escape.
There must be some way out of here, said the Joker to the thief. And if there is, you came to the right place to find this out, to break the veils open and see reality for what it is. That has been the ethos of the show for many, many years. We don't take prisoners, but liberate them. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything. You are the final authority, and you come here to get that gnosis. So welcome to Aeon Byte. Welcome to the desert of the real. My name, as always, is Miguel Connor, and I am so excited to see you. I am so grateful that you are here on this Mars Day as we go to war against so many false narratives that continue. And as we find out, the rabbit hole always goes deeper than we could have ever imagined. But that's the fun of it, right? Discovery. And as the Gospel of Thomas says, saying number 2, first you will be disturbed and then you will be amazed. The truth will set you free, but often it will break your heart at first. That's just the way it is. I don't make the rules. I'm just here to guide you through the simulation. And I'm very excited for this show, because this show is definitely tailor-made for Aeon Byte, and we'll hit all the right notes that we love on this show. And we'll also deal with some great scholarship and ideas that are useful even today. And for that, we are joined by Nicholas E. George, who will be discussing his paper, which is actually now a book in book format, if you so choose. And that is Christ is Belial, the fraud that reset time. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Miguel, Vance, I'm honored. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure is all ours. And yes, with us too, we got the Moondog Vance. Vance, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm just fine. I'm ready to dial into Belial.
Oh, man, I'm stealing that.
Yeah, that's a good one. That could be like a rock album, title or something. Iron Maiden's next album, or something like that. So.
Yeah, I hope we're going to eliminate the confusion between Boaz and Baz and Belial and Satan and the devil and everybody, that there's so many, in Beelzebub, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Sackless, all these guys,
Sackless, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I also hear that David Bowie is the same guy as Elvis, too. I heard that.
He did an album called Ball, so there you go.
Well, let's have a ball with Belial.
Belial. Awesome.
Okay.
Well, we got those puns out of the way. Yeah, good to see everybody in the chat. I see H.P. Lovecraft is here. So, yeah, speaking of many names for bad guys, Grandpa, good to see you in the chat, and everybody else. And as always, if you do have a question, please super chat them so we can get to them. Graham, of course, doesn't need one since he is a co-host for this team. But yeah, we will get to them. And as always, please support Aeon Byte in any way you can. I'll have some housekeeping later if I can get to it. I just put out a article on my Elvis Substack talking about definite proof, which Vance saw the other day, of how Elvis was aware of the Gnostic Gospels and actually wrote about it. So check it out on the Elvis Substack, and yes, subscribe there and support if you get a chance. So let's get to the main event. Nicholas, how did this book is spanning, and again, it goes from one place in time to today. It's got a narrative, very important narrative, I would say. And It reminds me a lot. I'm not sure if you're aware of Philip K. Dick's work, but he always talked about the empire never ended. And you even quote that in the book too. The idea of, let me quote you, the Roman Empire never truly collapsed. It mutated. After losing military control over distant provinces, Rome perfected a spiritual military hybrid system rebranded as the Holy Roman Empire, using the office of the Pontificate Maximus to merge religious ritual with imperial authority. So that's very Philip K. Dick and what the Gnostics talk about. But tell us how you came to this amazing research and what was the process?
Well, let me start out with telling everybody the good news, because this is a dark, dark place that I was in when I started this research. But the good news is I'm not an atheist. I am in no way affiliated with any of the Masonic Abrahamic religions. There is no religion for my name. I associate most closely with Gnostics because they haven't been genocided off the face of the earth yet. But the ones that I would have associated most with have been. And that would be the Pythagoreans, who are best represented by the Mandaeans today. Or another version of Gnostic, you'll probably recognize. So that's pretty much my thing. I absolutely believe we have a pre-divine soul, that there's nothing that we could do to stop what is guaranteed to us next, any more than we could stop our free will of deciding to come here of our own free will, which we don't remember doing, but I do believe we did. So I actually have a very positive outlook on the pre-divinity and the post-divinity and the current divinity of the soul, which I think is what's being hidden here by all of these institutional religions, that we are appropriated by the monetary system. And that's why they're all pro-money. What I represent is something that's anti-money. Two major anti-money movements that were 600 years apart, 560 years apart. One with Pythagoras was stamped out. They deleted all of his information for 150 years until Philostratus, I can't remember his name. I can't remember his name right now. Started writing about him successfully, and it wasn't being burned. So we have those leftover writings from 150 years after his assassination, likely assassination. And then the movement in the desert under the crucified person and his brother James was also a Pythagorean 100% anti-money movement. And that's why they were turning over the money changers' tables and getting the money out of the temple. So my research started because I come from a very Christian family in the Southeast. And it's a no-no to not be a Christian. And so I had a lot of research to do to figure out why I wasn't comfortable with it, because I was a Christian for many, many years. And then my research led me to not be one, but I couldn't put my finger on why. I always felt like there was a God, but this can't be it, kind of thing, right? And without going into my personal master chef story about tragedy that I recovered from, and that made me as hard as I am today and as resilient as I am today, without boring everybody with my stories, I ended up discovering reincarnation through a dream while I was in prison for a crime that I would win in the Supreme Court later. And I don't have a record anymore, but I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons I spent so much time in there was for growing marijuana was because I was meant to have this epiphany, completely separated from everything that I thought was granted. And I prayed to Jesus Christ, and a miracle happened, and I won my Supreme Court case in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals in a 3-judge panel. And so I got out evangelizing, right? Strong in the word. Like I had a miracle that most people wish they'd seen, and most people have faith without evidence. I had both. And so when my research started turning up that something wasn't right, it was a struggle for me. And I was so, I'm going to say it, weaponized by this spiritual misunderstanding from birth that I didn't really know why it was an albatross on my shoulder, but it's always been. It's not anymore. I finally was able to get it off of me and to get it out of me. But I didn't understand what it was, or how this thing seemed to have its own autonomous state of being inside me. And then when I finally shook off Christianity, I shook off all the magic that went with it. And then I came full circle and realized that magic does exist. And then I started to come full circle and realize that demons exist, even if that's a really crude way of describing a self-feeding thought form, a feedback loop that takes on an autonomous consciousness of its own and doesn't require input from its original manufacturer anymore. Those types of thought forms, just like malware in a binary system, were developed by very advanced practitioners for a very long time before people even knew what the Ethernet was, before the internet even came out, right? And the internet malware is in a binary code, nowhere near as sophisticated as what these black magicians were writing, and probably a 4 or 5 variable, that much more sophisticated of a code than a binary system. So demonic malware was the first type of computer virus, and the Bible was the bridge that brought that computer virus into the mind of the human being. And as that changed over time, and more humans became literate, that template had to change with it. I'll shut up. Go ahead and ask questions.
No, this is brilliant, and thanks for sharing a very inspirational story and quite a struggle, and glad you came to where you came. So yeah, we want to get at the end of the interview, talk about solutions, which your work does offer, because we're still in the middle of it, as you were still in the middle of the Matrix. But give us the theses. I'm thinking from the usual suspects, and I know the quote is not original. I forgot who the theologian said. I'm sure somebody in the chat will know, because usually they're smarter than me. But you know the famous line, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing us he didn't exist. And you say, no, the greatest trick is convincing us that he's really Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
How do we get this switcheroo? This is
amazing. Christ, amazingly, by the work of Robert Eisenman, Dr. Robert Eisenman and Daniel T. Unterbrink, discloses after his lawsuit against the church in 2003, and they had to release the data that they were keeping occulted, that there was no Christ. There wasn't even anybody that they called Messiah. All of those translations were complete malarkey from an organization that was hell-bent on keeping the narrative alive. And that's why they kept them sequestered illegally until legally they had to give them up. So I started reading all the work that was unearthed, excavated from that discovery, and I found out that there was the most central antagonist in the Dead Sea Scrolls, hands down, this isn't even a question, is Belial. And Belial is the anthropomorphical humanization or personification of an ancient demon that represents worthlessness, but seems to have made many transformations before he was in the toilet with the last one there. Looks like he started as Baal, and then he became Belial, and but Baal seems to have changed into a different figure again. When Baal disappeared from the scene, Yahweh showed up. Now, where was Yahweh before Baal showed up? You know, it's kind of weird. They both took the same office. They had the same. They had the same metaphors. They both came on the clouds in victory. They were both known as the Cloud Rider, and they would bring the rains and the dew and the fertility. And literally, he had all the same responsibilities as Baal, but boy, he didn't want anybody worshiping that image anymore. And I think I live in Boulder, or near Boulder, Colorado, and we have a lot of people here that are transgender and like to change their color to colors of things you wouldn't want to touch in the forest because they're poisonous. And that reminds me of what Yahweh went through. For some reason, Baal decided to transmutate into something new and exciting for a new people, and reintroduced himself as I am. But Superman and Clark Kent are never in the same room at the same time, if nobody ever noticed.
No.
Which tells a story of a guy who changed form and doesn't want anybody to ever worship his previous form again. And so I think that this God has always been the same God, sackless.
Yeah. From the nonsense, yeah.
And I wasn't really confident in going there until I got into the work of Dr. Michael Newton. the hypnotist who takes people back to the theta state of consciousness, the deepest possible hypnosis that you can go to, and then he records what they say. And when you listen to the hundreds and hundreds of recordings that he's done over the 60 years of work that he's put together in his book, The Journey of Souls, oh my God, there is no better scientific methodology for arriving at who and what we are, and what we can expect when we pass, which is pure love. So what he determined is that every bad thing, every bad entity can only be experienced when we're here. And it's on this side of the veil of Isis or Sophia. And when a soul becomes advanced enough, it's actually given the opportunity to create its own worlds. And that's in the second book, the Destiny of Souls. And so after reading this book 5-6 times, it just came to me that that's sackless. If he has a soul, which I don't think he does. I think he's a mechanical, bastardized being, just like the creatures, the demonic creatures that he creates. But and I think that's why it's jealous of us, because we actually are souls. We have that spark that it doesn't possess. So it gets jealous when the spark doesn't worship it, because it built this place. But according to the work of Dr. Michael Newton, if Yaldabaoth exists and does have a soul, then he's just an advanced soul who makes mistakes. And I think that's the best shake we can give Yaldabaoth, is that at best he's an advanced version of us who's been given this opportunity to create this game board for us to come resistance train on and run through an educational enrollment on that we don't remember entering. But he's not perfect and does make mistakes, and all the jealousy stuff starts to fit when you look at it from that perspective. So I dug back into the Bible to find out what are the chances that there's nowhere in the Bible where the God of the Bible claims to be the creator of souls.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't.
No, he doesn't. Actually, you're right. Yeah.
There's one place that comes closest, and I know there's a bunch of Christians out there, if they listen to this show, going, ooh, me. But I know, I got you. So it's when I don't remember if it's Jeremiah or Isaiah. One of them says that he's speaking from the position of God, and he says, "I knew you before I even formed you in your mother's womb."
Right.
And so that is evidence that we are pre-divine, and that as an ego with an eternal soul and with an individual personality like a fingerprint, we existed before this whole covenant was ever decided upon. It knew us, and so it didn't create us, or it would say that. But and even I don't know that I believe it if it did, but the fact that it doesn't is really tight. It smells of black magic for occult disclosure. And so I started looking through the Bible for other forms of occult disclosure when I realized that this may not be the creator of our soul. And that's when I started to discover Paul's work. And Paul gave us some very important disclosure in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 15, where he says, he riddles people this: what harmony exists between Christ and Belial? Between a believer and an unbeliever? What commonality is there between a believer and an unbeliever? And then a couple chapters later, he decides to make this comment in chapter 11, verse 14. And it's no wonder, like you should, of course, duh, is what that meant back then. No wonder that the adversary, or Satan, whichever your Bible says, appears as an angel of light, or likes to masquerade as an angel of light. It doesn't say sometimes, it doesn't say all the times, it just says, does it? And so when I started asking hardcore Christians, of all the angels of light that the adversary would masquerade around as, who do you think that would be? And that's where they get stumped. And because there's, if you're going to pose as an angel of light, you're not going to pose as a subordinate, right?
Right.
And why not pose as the one that Paul just made a suggestion there was a connection between a few chapters earlier. And Paul was a tax collector and a Roman citizen, and his sister was married to Mr. Archelaus. His nephew was Julius Archelaus, because his mother, Paul's sister, was married to the the treasurer of the Jewish temple, and this treasurer was one of Herod's family. And so he married into his sister to Herod's family and was basically looking out for the best interests of the treasury.
For sure. Yeah, I love what you're saying. And yeah, again, I go back to Philip K. Dick, because he did say the empire never ended. But if you read his third Gnostic trilogy, The Divine Invasion, where God has to break back into the world because he's been kicked out, the enemy is Belial. That he doesn't use the demiurge like in other novels. He goes right to Belial as the big bad hombre of the story. So it's interesting. But so how did it happen? Because this Belial, whether he's a desert demon, some sort of algorithm, space alien, whatever he is, he hit the jackpot because he got to run most of the known world once the Abrahamic religions came out. I mean, he was like a kid in a candy store. Souls, money, adulation, billions of people, power, destroy lives, feed off of their loot and their pain. But how did it happen? And basically, the people in the Dead Sea Scrolls saw it coming. But when the big switcheroo, like I said, this was the Roman Empire, or what was that, where they switched them off for Jesus? How did it, what was the process?
A lot of people don't know that Paul was one of the first important counterintelligence agents for what would become the most important intelligence agency in the world, the Society of Jesus.
But Nicholas, you find interesting, Paul is also giving away the plot. He's talking about the God of this world, the powers and principalities, the archons. So, he is kind of giving it away at the same time, which, people do that all the time. The elite always just tell you because they know 99% of people won't believe it.
Well, I used to think that that's why they did that, because they were showing off. Yeah. But I found out that that's a prerequisite for lasting magic.
Oh, good point. Yeah,
so I want people to remember that I said this. The next time you hear a contradiction in the Bible, remember Nick G. Love is my pen name, after my grandfather, who was a famous writer, Edmund G. Love. But remember that I said this. There's no contradictions. It's black magic. It's called black magic disclosure, ritual substitution. And so black magicians, if they really want to be good at what they're doing, they're going to tell the victim what they're up to, so that the victim is bound by their free will, which is the most powerful thing on the planet. And the God of the Bible and the demons all know this. There's nothing more powerful on the planet than the spark that you're temporarily carrying in this carcass suit, in this meat suit. And everybody wants a piece of it. But they don't want to tell you how powerful it is at all. And most people don't know how powerful it is, even the ones feeding off of it, especially the ones feeding off of it, or they probably would choose a different course. But I can't tell you enough how important it is for those of you that are drinking every night and diving in that hole like I was, because there's no one to talk to, to discover the work of Dr. Michael Newton, and everything will change, and you will remember your true power and your true identity. But that's not what I write about. I write about the dark stuff. That just helped me save myself from the pit, to realize that. But making connections. The most important connection to make in the Dead Sea Scrolls is the fact that the demon does all of his work with nets. He uses 3 specific nets: the net of ritual pollution, fornication, and we're going to have to come back to the third one, but it's kind of along the same lines. But any type of blood drinking, forgive me, meat eaters. Okay, I can't control where the data took me, but these were Pythagoreans, and ain't nobody going to argue with the fact that Pythagoreans were the original vegans, and the word vegan came out 100 years ago, probably put out by the same terrorist organization that's trying to bury the legacy of the Pythagoras. But it was called a Pythagorean aesthetic diet before it got veganized. But the Pythagorean aesthetic diet was known to carry the average person over 100 years on average, at a time when the average person wasn't living to 50. And that knowledge was over 2,500 years old before the death cult started trying to remove it from our access. And so since then, they've been using one of the most important nets of Belial's pollution, the all food is blessed net, to lure people into the worst kinds of ritual pollution of the gut bacteria, gut microbiome. And when you pollute the gut microbiome, you open portals not just for little demons, but the big ones too, because as above, so below. Once you let in those little hijackers, they take over your neurological system and start changing what you're interested in, what you're attracted to, who you're attracted to, what you want to drink, what you want to eat. And then a lot of what you say is affected by those things. And so taking control of the gut, according to all of the great sages, Apollonius of Tyana, Judas the Galilean, James the Just, Pythagoreans, the revolution starts in the gut bacteria or you don't stand a chance. And so one of the most important nets of Belial is to attack your gut bacteria with ritual pollution, telling you things like all food is blessed. And to take it a step further, in Mark 7, Jesus says, don't even wash your hands before you eat whatever you want. And he doesn't limit it to what goes in your mouth. He says anything you put in your body from outside you can't harm you either. And we know what kind of commercial that sounds like. And that's not a coincidence. That's the same terrorist organization running the same type of biological weapon and warfare techniques for 2,600 years. And if they've been hell-bent on this way of managing humans since then, just imagine what they're spraying in our skies above us.
I just put out a video on that. Yeah. Now it's more apparent. Yeah. What about you, Vince? What does your gut tell you? Or is that archonic bacteria talking to you?
Well, I don't know. Maybe my bacteria is going to give you a bad answer. But I don't know. It seems to me that, if there's that much against us, there, in the supernatural realm, there must be some creatures for us. So, I'm wondering, like, who is for us? I mean, I've always, when I've read words of Jesus, I thought there was a lot of good stuff in there. So, and all we really had of Jesus is what you could read, right? Since obviously he's not running around the planet. So it's kind of hard for me to accept that, well, I mean, would you say Jesus is downright evil and is behind all this stuff of polluting us and, screwing us up and shortening our lifespans and making us sick? Is that Jesus' work?
That's Belial. And so I guess I should have explained it a little further. So the Rome doesn't invent anything very well, but they can take ingenious inventions by really good intending people, and they can turn them on their head and then sell them like they've never been sold before. And so that's what this is. They basically took the teachings of the original founder of the fourth philosophy and his brother James the Just, and they turned it on its head and then sold it through a package named Jesus Christ that never physically existed and so therefore never had a soul. And so this anthropomorphical creation is a mechanical entity that lives only in the mind of the believer. And I mean, if you're into demonology, you can definitely make the argument that it's in the ether too, and doesn't require humans to give it input anymore because it's been in existence for this long now that it's kind of a permanent fixture, unless the same effort is made to remove it. But the original fourth philosophy movement, when I get those warm fuzzies about Jesus and the words that you said from the Gospel of Thomas, Miguel, and I wanted to add to the quote from Thomas, but I'll do that later, is that those quotes are from James. Typically, they were from James.
Well, the Gospel of Thomas just says if you want to know everything, James is the guy you go to.
So that was the one time that we're listening to Judas, Yehuda, which they changed to Yeshua. Wasn't a hard change, but Yehuda was talking about his brother James because James was actually the spiritual teacher of righteousness of the group, and that Judas didn't hold a candle to him as far as his righteousness, which was how they ranked each other among the Ebionite Essene community. You were not ranked by elderness. You were not ranked by what you owned or what coercions that you had over your fellow member of the camp. You were ranked by righteousness, which could change if you made bad decisions instantly. But James was the most righteous person in the whole camp. They compared him to the ancient righteous teacher that had come 600 years earlier in all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which they could not name. But that ancient righteous teacher I found through a researcher named Bob Young and through Robert Eisenman was Pythagoras, most definitely. He was the original teacher of righteousness in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that's why the church is hell-bent on making sure that we never know that that's a Pythagorean movement. They want us to always think it's Jewish, which doesn't make sense because the Jews don't eat the way that James ate. James never touched meat from birth, and so when people say, "Well, how did Jesus eat meat if he was raised in the same house with James and they had the same mother?" Well, then the Christian apologists try to separate the households. They give Jesus one mother named Mary. They give James another mother named Mary. And then they tell us that they're sisters, the George Foreman sisters. Everybody's named Mary. Right?
And that's how the Bob Newhart show. This is Daryl and my other brother, Daryl.
Yeah, right.
Does anybody remember that? Okay, good.
Or the movie There's Something About Mary. Yeah, Mary is more than one Mary.
Yeah, a lot of Marys.
So, and Mary means rebellious Jew, woman. And that was actually one of the things that I gleaned from not my favorite researcher, but he it turns out that was correct. That was the way Romans talked down to female Hebrews when they were genociding them in the Second Temple leveling. And so it's really weird that Rome chose that as the name for the mother of their inverted Messiah. So Belial was a pre-existing demonological vehicle, a very important, powerful utility vehicle that Paul didn't have to invent because it had already been invented by his enemies in the desert for him. All Paul had to do was build a costume to give that vehicle, to give his creation legs. He put it over Belial. And that would sound just crazy if Paul hadn't told us directly that that's what he was doing. Mm-hmm. But because he said the clue, and I understood why we were being told right in front of us what was happening, that these are not contradictions, that this is ritual black magic and substitution. Once I started to understand how this all works, it became quite obvious to me that they're telling us right in front of our face that this guy is going to lead us into where we are today. And he has led us right where we are today. They had 2,000 years to prove that being blessed and washed in the blood of this child sacrifice was better than chasing righteousness. In fact, and I think it's Matthew 5. I don't have it in front of me. Anyway, somewhere in Matthew chapter 5, he talks about how nobody's getting to heaven unless they're more righteous than the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. Right. Now, how can the same guy say that if Paul, the one who's promoting him, says you can't even possibly be righteous enough to get into heaven, so don't even try, just have faith, because works don't save you. But then you've got James, who's actually the leader of the Church of Jerusalem, the brother of the crucified person, telling people your faith is dead without works. Mm-hmm. And so that was the biggest contention between James and Paul, was those two things. One was a very lazy religion, which just said pay homage to your oppressor and have faith and this fake Messiah, and everything will be fine. And then you had James saying it's just the opposite. You can't touch money, and your righteousness is what saves you. And then in the Gospel of Thomas, James said, if you bring forth what is within you, it will save you. If you fail to bring forth what is within you, it will destroy you. And that fit with what the work of Dr. Michael Newton said about the eternal nature of the soul. And that's when it dawned on me that they are suppressing that knowledge and that sense of being. Much like a farmer puts a water wheel in a stream, slow it down a little, gain a little free energy. We're being harvested by a parasitic organization that worships Saturn and the moon, which seems to be working with their cause in some way. That, a great book for people to read that are tracing my research would be The Cult of the Black Cube by Arthur Moros.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
When I read that book and I got to the end of it, and he was talking about how the most powerful black magic is done in ritual with a bunch of different black creatures, animals. And then I went back and watched the photographer who caught the magic bullet on Trump's ear. Can't remember his name right now, but he's famous for doing interesting things like that shouldn't be possible for the deep state. Right. And one of the things he was famous for before catching the magic bullet was he was the photographer that was filming when Bush was in the elementary school in Florida when the planes were hitting the towers. And so I went back and watched that episode of him filming the children, him reading the story to the children, and him and the teacher talking to the children before the planes hit the buildings, and the guy comes in and tells them. And it hit me, man, it hit me hard. Arthur Moros nailed it. And I hate to say this, and I was raised in the South. I have a lot of black friends. I'm not saying this to be negative about black people, but you couldn't have a more powerful black magic ceremony than the one that after listening to what Arthur Moros said, that you can use any kind of animal as long as it's black. And then I saw that, and there was 30 black kids, 30 little kids, and they were all repeating, "Kite must hit steel. Kite must hit steel.
Oh, yes, I've heard
Kite
that.
must hit steel. The plane must
Yeah.
hit steel." They repeated it 3 times in a mantra before they started reading the My Pet Goat
In
book.
front of Bush, yeah.
If you go back and watch those mantras that they're saying, when they finally stop saying it 3 or 4 times in a row that this plane or kite must hit steel, that's when Bush gets the whisper in the ear. Second plane has hit the building. They change gears and start reading My Pet Goat, which a lot of people say has something to do with Baphomet. But
Or
that was a
Belial.
black magic.
Belial or Azrael. Some of these demons already were represented as goats, or they sacrificed goats to them. So, yeah, I think 9/11 was a ritual too, personally. And I hate to tell you this, Nicholas, but I don't know if you were waiting, but I don't think you're going to be elected the next pope. I think this interview is going to just remove all your hopes of being the next pope. So
The Protestants aren't off the hook either. It's the same Jesus, literally.
Yeah. Of course.
And so when I started researching this, I started getting into demonology, and I noticed a weird phenomenon. You might like this. You may not have heard this before. But every demonological teacher's key, like the Lesser Key of Solomon, that has come out as the teacher key to go along with the student textbook, which is the Bible, has happened almost right after the major transformation in the Bible has occurred. So as soon as and I don't know if Enoch was part of this, but Enoch was like one of the first demonological manuals that came out right after the Septuagint was translated by the same Babylonians and Greeks that had destroyed the Jewish temple the first time. So we notice this change where the Jews get wiped out, their text gets remodified, and then a demonological key comes out in parallel with it. The next major time something goes wrong is during the anti-money movement of Judas the Galilean and his brother James the Just. And then they wipe it out. They start writing proto-gospels, and they put them all together in 325 AD. And then they perfect them with the Vulgate and the Sinaiticus, the Codex Sinaiticus first, and then 55 years later, the Vulgate before 400 AD. But right in between those two, they came out with the teacher's key, the demonological manual, the first Solomon, this Testament of Solomon. And in this testament, Solomon is said to have built the Temple of Solomon with the use of a general contractor named Belial.
Fascinating.
And Belial was the one that would go and fetch other demons from the other side of the portal that had been opened to help in the manufacture of the temple. But Belial was the general contractor for Solomon. Now, who do we know is the general contractor for Solomon according to Masonic tradition?
Yeah, it's God, what's his name again? Oh my God. Hiram
Abiff, the exalted brother, is what that means. Exalted brother, Hiram. And that guy, if there was legitimacy to the Jewish tradition that was not demonic, and the Temple of Solomon wasn't built by demons, that still very well could be the case. But it doesn't matter, because whoever took over and rewrote the story and rewrote the teacher's key made it look like it was built by demons.
Right.
So there's this this tradition of destroying the Jews and then blaming the Jews for everything over and over and over. 2,600 years, their temple gets destroyed and they go, oh, we're sorry, we probably deserved it. And then for the next 500 years, the conquering party blames them for everything bad that happens. And every Tisha B'Av memorial celebration of the Hebrews, which basically translates to a 9/11 event in our language. There were 7 of them leading up to our 9/11, which they considered to be another Tisha B'Av attack against the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. But it's always the same organization, this Babylonian Roman death cult, and they always do the same MO where they rewrite scripture, come out with a new demonological manual, and then blame everything on the Jews, and then keep building until they run into another resistance movement. But they came out with the Solomon's Testament right after the Codex and the Vulgate. What are the odds that they did that again when the first Protestant Bible came out? Now, what is the most powerful Bible that the Masons go by? It is the King James 1611 edition. Mm. King James wrote demonology.
Yeah, he did.
Right?
Put out
4
books,
years,
yeah.
4 years before that Bible came out, something like that. 12 years, 4 years, 5 years, something like that, right before the King James Bible came out. So people are like, there's no way these guys are in on it. Oh, they're in on it, right? But the demonology manual that came out before his Bible did not name and categorize the demons because he was afraid to demonstrate too much intimacy with the knowledge. But it definitely demonstrated a belief in it by the very people who were producing the most important Bible that was ever read by a newly literate human species. And so the Bible that's been read the most by any human being in the world, because literacy was just coming of age after the Renaissance, is the King James Version. It's an 80 legion template. And I have counted exactly the number of words in each book as in a Roman legion. And so when we start reading the Demonological Teacher's Key that came out before King James and then right after King James with the Ars Goetia and the Lesser Key of Solomon, we find out that the demon that uses 80 template, that uses an 80 legion army specifically is Belial.
Interesting. Well, good connection.
The most important Protestant Bible that was ever invented was built on the 80 legion template that was Belial's. And when they removed the Apocrypha and they removed the Gospel of John, they probably could have gotten away with 10 books, 9 books, but they took out 14. And the reason they took out 14 is encoded in the Demonological Manual, the Ars Goetia, the Lesser Key of Solomon, who is the right-hand man of Baal, the king of demons, because Belial is the prince. He's kind of a puppet. These are all machines, but one's a lesser machine that's operated by the bigger machine and who's invisible behind the scenes. Belial's the puppet that's out on the stage that we can see, that shows us one side when he needs to and the other side when he needs to, like a coin, a prince of duality. But the one who's got his hand up him is Baal, the spider king, the one who operates in secret, who operates invisibly like a spider. The 8 legs represent Saturn, and he builds the web. But Belial casts the web and captures the souls for luge harvesting. And he uses it through his dual image of Christ or Belial, depending on whether he needs to lure you or scare you. But he is the fisher of men using the exact nets of deception in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And once you're caught in them, the only thing that's going to make you feel good again is catching others in the same nets so you don't feel alone. And so they, like a pyramid scheme, turn the captured into other fishers of men.
MLM marketing.
And the fish that are caught are not saved. They're eaten. Now, what are the odds that this demon would demonstrate by the rules of demonology that it is a demon and not a soul? We find that in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, where John, the same guy who wrote the Apocrypha of John, outlining the lion as the demiurge, and the same one who tells us that Jesus is the lion in Revelation, is telling us in chapter 3, verse 20, that he's the outsider standing outside of your covenant, your mind, body, soul covenant, knocking at that door, wondering when you're going to open the portal so he can come in and dine. And when you ask a Christian apologist, what's the purpose of him coming in to eat? Oh, that's just how people interacted back then. That was a way of being intimate. Well, that's intimate. And he's coming in to dine. And you know what? A soul can't. A soul can't enter the covenant of another soul under any circumstances. No matter how much you open your heart to your wife, whether she's disembodied or still alive, she cannot enter your covenant. That is a violation of all of the rules of everything that I've ever researched, whether it's Dr. Michael Newton or the rules of demonology. But you know what kind of entity? It behaves by exactly those rules. The demon. It can come in. It can actually come in and dwell with the soul inside of its covenant, inside of its house. But it can only do it with the permission of the soul, because the soul is the superior entity. But it convinces you that it's the superior entity, and without it, you feel worthless because it is the Lord of worthlessness.
Who set all this up like this? You know, I mean, like we're sitting ducks. All these powerful demons are coming in and doing souls, and they have to trick us, but they can come in. And I mean, like, you
want to talk to the manager, Vance?
Yeah.
Well, Vance, you need Michael Newton. You got to read it. I promise you. We should do a whole nother show on what happens after you read it, because
sure,
it turns atheists. It turns atheists into people that are more elated than Christians. I mean, once you know this stuff, you have more bliss than anybody that's believing a false narrative. And my wife does this for a living, and so I have a unique perspective in that I can test it scientifically by watching her hypnotize other people and see what they're reporting from the other side. And I don't care what your spiritual background is. If Michael Newton puts you into the theta state of consciousness, you're going to tell us what the name of your...
no longer with us. He said
he's dead.
What a pity. But so Journey of the Souls is what you recommend.
Journey of Souls. That's the starter book. And then if you can hang with that one, then the next book is Destiny of Souls. And that is the good news at the end of the portal. I mean, it's life-changing. And if you know anybody that's on the verge of suicide, wait till they get to the chapter in the first book on that. They'll never think about it again. There's literally nothing you can do to end it. All you're doing is putting yourself back in time out and slowing down your progress when you violate the covenant that you entered into. And that's the biggest violation that you can make. That's worse than killing somebody else as far as the setback that it causes in your educational experience. But Earth is, according to this research, is not the only place that we go. It's the hardest. It's where you learn the most, the quickest. And it's the one that we need to take long breaks from compared to the other places we can go. But the people that are put under say that there's other game boards with softer consequences that we go to between trips here, and when we want to take a break from being in the perfect reality on the other side, where souls reside between incarnate experiences. But this information was gleaned from hypnosis thousands of years ago. And after doing research into the Skull and Bonesmen and Queen Elizabeth and their work for the Vatican, overthrowing China with cheap opium back in the 1800s, and then laundering all that money through the U.S. educational system, through the Congregationalists. Mm-hmm. There's a great book on that called Killing Uncle Sam, or The Killing of Uncle Sam, if you want to read it. That's where that information comes from. And Queen Elizabeth was using remote viewing through her lead spy named John Dee. And John Dee had a medium that he carried around with him that could be hypnotized like that. I mean, he was one of those that instead of taking 3 hours to get into the theta state of consciousness, it took him like an hour, right? So he was John Dee's one-trick pony. But once John Dee would have this guy deep enough, he would ask him to leave his body and go to China and seek out targets that they needed to destroy for their overthrow. And Queen Elizabeth used him successfully more often than not for espionage. And so the people that control us have known about the work of Dr. Michael Newton for thousands of years, and it actually fits perfectly with the research of Pythagoras and the other people that were self-initiated into his research. have all come to the exact same conclusions about the soul. And so it appears that that's what this dark monetary force that controls us through biowarfare and lack of knowledge is hiding from us. And they've known it. And that's why they're not afraid of hell, because they know what happens next through this scientific methodology that I discovered.
Very interesting. Yeah, it was what Robert Anton Wilson called it, the Babylon Con, that magic from ancient Babylon. Then even some have said when the Jews came back to Jerusalem, they didn't bring back Yahweh. They might have brought back Marduk or one of those really other power, or Mithra, one of those really like world conquering, very powerful, but also very mercurial gods. So, and it's too, because the church fathers always scoffed at the Gnostics and sneeringly called them Neo-Pythagoreans. So when they were saying that, they were saying you're on the other side of, because Plato was a Pythagorean and so were the Gnostics. They were
now go to different. Now go to the website for the Vatican and look at the top of the top and who's who that runs that place, and look at their bio, and guess what all of them are? They're listed Neoplatonists.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, look it up. They all admit it. And so, I mean, it's like they're just telling us right in front of us that they got the truth, but they're giving us Folgers crystals.
Interesting. Yeah, and it also reminds me of what you said. There's when people are worried about things, about the archons and all that, there's a passage, I think it's in the Apocalypse of James or the Secret Book of James, and Jesus simply says, if you're going up into the heavens and you run into archons and they're asking for passwords and they want to devour you, all you need to tell them is, this is not my home. And the archons will say, all right, go along. You got us, you've called them out, and that's it. You don't need any magic spells and incantations. So don't feel bad, Vance. It's not so bad unless you're worried.
All right. It's kind of overwhelming, all this, these people. It reminds me of Dracula. You got to invite him in, right?
Yeah, well, there's a reason that we're told that, and I found out why. Demonology is a very old understanding, and hidden in it is that you're the most powerful thing here, and that's what they don't tell us.
Our divine spark is far superior than them, but we've just been taught not to. We've been taught to worship, to be worthless, and we worship, but we're more powerful than they are.
All the Hollywood movies we were raised on, that didn't work to save people from the bad guy. What did work?
Exactly.
The cross.
Yes.
All those old Hollywood movies. Who funded those, right? Of course they did, right? Every bad movie, every demon-esque movie, the cross is what saved people from the entity at the end. So a great story that leads into that, Mark chapter 3, verse 22, when Jesus is he's doing a miracle and he's getting rid of a demonic possession from a boy or a girl, a man, and he's successful doing it. And the crowd's like, oh, he's the prince of demons. Only the prince of demons can cast people out in his name and stuff like that. And when he's asked directly, are you? He doesn't answer. He deflects the question like a lawyer instead to procedure and says, would Satan divide his own house? Would Satan cause a house to be divided against itself, causing the strong man of the house to become bound or tied up by him? And then he follows up in Matthew 12, verse 49 through 53 by saying, guess what I came to do? I came to burn your house down. In fact, I wish it started burning down yesterday. And your family, I hope that I'm coming to make sure that nobody gets along. And then he starts mentioning members of the family. I hope your stepmom and your father and your brother and your mother, everybody starts hating each other. That's what I came to do, is separate families. And you're thinking, well, he must have meant that. That's a hyperbole. You start making up. He's just gaslighting. And then chapter 14, verse 26, he says, just in case you weren't clear, I want you to hate your father, and I want your father to hate your mother, and he just runs down the list again, saying, hate, hate, hate. I came to separate, hate. I did not come to bring peace. The Prince of Peace is saying this. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. I want it all burning. In fact, I would wish it was already kindled, is what he said. So why would he tell us in Mark 3:22 that would be silly, and that Satan would only be bringing his own house down if he did that? And then he says, that's what I came to do. And he didn't deny that he was Beelzebub. And then in Mark chapter 7, he gives the advice of Beelzebub hygienically. Don't wash your hands, and you can eat whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And that's been the most terrible advice that any human could have as far as food goes, ever. And even 2,000 years ago, they knew better, right? Because they had thousands of years of data passed down from grandfather to son about what not to eat and why. And then somebody just comes along and tosses the baby out with the bathwater regarding food ethics and expects that not to turn into a microbial possession of the gut microbiome. And so, here we are, monkeys eating steaks, blessing each other in the name of Jesus.
In the name of Jesus, Jesus Christ. Jesus. Anything from you, Vance, or any super chats?
Well, I think Jewish people eat steak. Steak is kosher.
Exactly. Exactly. So how could they have been Jewish, right?
Wait a minute.
My point.
No. I mean, the Bible, supposedly, if you believe it, says what, all the things in the Old Testament that say what the Jews can't eat, divideth the hoof and all that stuff. And beef was not among the, if it was killed properly and all that stuff, that they ate kosher beef, right?
Sure, you're absolutely right. So
what about the gut biome then?
So why was James so darn righteous? If
I don't know, maybe he had a wild hare up his, I don't know, or a wild bull up his.
So the biggest secret hiding in what you just asked is Pythagoras. They do not want you to know that Pythagoras was the original righteous teacher from 2,600 years ago. And that's why they built the state of Israel around the Dead Sea Scroll find. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go ahead and let that out. You guys familiar with the Celestine prophecy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anybody ever given you the Captain Crunch secret decoder ring about what that book's really about?
No, I just remember it was like synchronicity before I knew what synchronicity was.
The 9 insights are...
Go ahead.
I remember that was about how science, how science has ruined spirituality, basically. That was a big thing I remember about it.
Yeah. And as they were discovering the insights from inside the caves in Peru or wherever they were, the government and religious leaders were teaming to stop them. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Redman, whatever his name is that wrote that, he was afraid of suffering the fate of Salman Rushdie. He was scared for his life, but he wanted the insights of the Dead Sea Scrolls, James, and the fourth philosophy to reach us. And that's why Christians really loved that message, even though there's nothing Christian about it, really. It seems to violate their food advice and everything, because it was the Celestine prophecy was all about a plant-based lifestyle. But I read it 30 years ago and didn't realize until 3 years ago that it's a nonfiction posing as a fiction so that he doesn't put himself in trouble. But that's Israel in the 1800s when people were discovering the scrolls. And we were not officially told that they even existed until 1946, after the church had successfully run the psychological operations necessary to contain it. And you can imagine what psychological operations I'm talking about that were necessary to create that state in the Middle East, that could not have existed any other way had it not been for a catalyst known as the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see George Bush's grandfather, Prescott, the Union Bank thing, the House of Bath, the Bushes. What's going on there, right? And so I started tracing it all, and it's the oldest terrorist, the wealthiest organization on the planet. And this is how they operate. And they literally created a playwright named Theodore Herzl to convince people to give that real estate to the Jews. And so Theodore Herzl was 100% a puppet for the Vatican, made to look like the champion of a Zionist movement. And this was a Jesuit movement. If you read this, the oath of induction for the Jesuits, this is their method of operation, is to create their own opposition movements so they can control the game board on both sides. And so the whole operation of hating Jews is overplayed as that death cult's play page from that playbook is, it's still magically working so well. And it's described in the 48 Laws of Power book by Robert Greene as the 26th law, the scapegoat. And that's what it was designed to be. It had two purposes: to put crime scene tape around the discovery of the scrolls until they could contain it. And World War II may have been fought over that. I mean, it was that important to protect the narrative from what James's followers might have put in those caves. The whole monetary system hung in the balance. It still does. And so that's why my book, I think, is so important, because literally the thing that everyone feels deeply they hate about the way we interact with each other, the way we exchange value with each other, is money. And it should go away 100%. It would literally make everyone's life better. We would treat each other better. People would really start doing good things again through, good works, instead of, the flowering forms of coercion and despotism that have sprang forth from this tool, which has only been used for two purposes, and that's to slowly steal people's sovereignty and equity, like they're wading in a lazy river and not even knowing that it's happening while they're hanging out. And there's never been a monetary system that's been anything other than a lazy river of equity and sovereignty theft, or the Vatican, which bases this entire concept on the faith and indebtedness of Jesus Christ. You take down the first narrative, and the entire monetary system has to come down with it, because that's the trust that supports it. It's not gold. And even when it was gold, that's not worth anything to us either. That was another false value we were chasing, and that is the metal in alchemy that's associated with Belial. That's why that's on my cover, the cover of my book. Chasing false value is one of the nets of pollution.
Fascinating. And you see, as we get towards the end, you see the Knights Hospitalators as the real bad guys, not the Templars. And then the idea of maritime law. I have a friend, she thinks that's the key to freedom, understanding maritime law. Could you speak to that?
Maritime law is basically a way to tag ported goods for taxation and control of economic energy flows, and birthing products at the port they decided to do that with human beings. And so they created the port of the hospital, so that people could come there to die and come there to birth and come there in between when they just get sick. And a lot of people signed over their life's assets to pontifical organizations in an attempt to buy salvation in the last moments of their life with a chaplain next to them. And the money that they were able to receive by creating those portals, those channels of theft, hospitals, it never stopped. And so when people wondered how the deep state flexed on us so hard during a couple of years ago, I mean, they built it, and they built it as part of a what's the word for it? It's part of a biological warfare strategy. You come in and you turn everybody's dietary and health knowledge upside down, and then you build the infrastructure that's going to save them when the inevitable happens, right?
Yeah.
And so they figured this out with central banking too. They bankrupted us through their little Belial puppets like J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller and all those guys, and then they came in and saved us with their central banking salvation system. And so it's just, once they figured out how to do this with humans, they just kept going with it.
Or
right?
Monsanto, they'll give you the seeds, but only they have the pesticides that work that won't kill those plants. So it's like,
and then they can sue you if it mixes with your corn.
Yeah, exactly. You can't win with these people. They're monsters. There's monsters. Yeah. Well said. Vince, any last question? I think I saw Graham somebody doing.
Yeah, Graham's got one. But before I get to Graham's, why don't these guys start going after each other? I mean, they can't all be one big happy family. Oh, we're demons and we never fight with each other. And why don't they all destroy each other?
I don't think they know.
Evil and
I mean, I've got a family member that's a Knight of Malta, and he hates me, and he doesn't believe anything that I say. But to him, he feels like he's a pilot at American Airlines or something with his little uniform and his sword and his little red passport that can get him through through any airport. A lot of these guys have no clue.
I forgot the people, the demons. The demons.
Oh,
the demons. All right, let's say they're all puppets of the demons. They don't know. The demons. Why don't the demons all fight? Are they all one big happy family? And they never fight with each other, and they never wrestle each other for power. I mean, I can't believe that all these eons that these demons are all together and they're all controlling us and they're not fighting with each other.
They may be.
Maybe they're on the Epstein list, so they have to keep quiet.
I mean, if you want to see what a day in the life of a demon looks like, if you want to see what the day in the life of a demon looks like, just study an intracellular parasite like the one that the government is making right now, or has been making since 1950. And please don't never invite me back because I did this. When I said this on Sam Tripoli's show, he almost crapped himself. But
Sam, he's Mr. Conspiracy. He's at the top of the conspiracy. He's the apex.
He just became a Christian.
Yes, I forgot. He's now more Christian.
A guy named El Dorado converted him after I had an interview with him where we both agreed that it's a satanic operation. So I don't know what to think about that guy anymore.
Yeah.
But he was too afraid for me to say this on his channel. I'm just going to throw it out there because it's already in a book called Bitten by Chris Newby. They've been weaponizing the gut microbes in our gut microbiome for over 70 years. All we have to do is research the deathbed confessions of William Bergdorfer, the guy who named the precursor for Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi. Willie Bergdorfer on his deathbed in 2013 admitted to Chris Newby that he was the founder and creator of an intracellular rickettsia that they worked on in the Fort Detrick laboratory for years until they perfected until they weaponized it. And then they basically sprayed it out the back of airplanes over major cities. And now it's congenitally passed to everyone. We get it when we're born from our mother. And so you never shake it. It goes dormant in some people depending on their lifestyle choices and their food choices, but we all have it and we're probably always going to have it. So the idea of getting rid of it and not getting it again is ridiculous because you'd grab a doorknob and pick it up again later. But Rickettsia helvetica is an intracellular parasite that's undetectable in all U.S. hospitals. That's not the case in every other country. But here specifically, they've made it the case because it is the most pervasive infection in the United States. It does not come across like any normal infection. It looks like people are brain fogged, like they can't retain information. They don't want to retain information. And if you make them try, they'll fight back. They'll do everything they can to support their common worldview. And if anything you say shakes it, they go into defense mode, like it's a demon running the show. And that's another way I came to this knowledge was by studying these creatures. Once I made the discovery in 2019, and then how could they have known this 2,600, 2,000 years ago? Like that this dual effect happened when you're compromised. But apparently they have known it, and they've been trying to weaponize these things to do even more damage ever since they've had the ability to do that. So you have to, if that doesn't motivate you to change the way you eat and to change the way that you live, because you're fighting against a predator that's that hard to fight, I don't know what is. And I don't know what other evidence that someone would need that this is what we're up against than hearing it from the person that invented it on his deathbed.
Wow. I need to check out this gut stuff. Very fascinating for sure. Any last thing, Vance? Did you say Graham had a question or you had a question?
Yeah, Graham has one. Here we go. What type of energy powers demons and how can humans use that energy instead?
Blood and the soul's light, which is invisible in our world. So Christ is the light of this world. That's not us. That's not us. We're from somewhere else. We're from the pleroma, is what you guys call it. But Michael Newton calls it the life between lives, but it's the same place. Right. And everybody describes it when they're in the theta state of hypnosis. So the demons, they reside in the physical and the material world. They stay here. There's no spiritual battle in the heaven that I'm talking about because they're not even allowed there. It's completely sealed off from that type of thing. But here, they're feeding on soul energy. They're feeding on the force that we're exerting, pushing against the wheel of this body. And it's our soul that's pushing the wheel. And so they're really harvesting the soul's energy until the body gives out, right? And they're also, money is another form of energy, of course, which is related to the moon. Like Mount Sinai is named after the moon. Sin, which almost became the most important god in Babylon. If one king had had his way, it would have been. But money was basically invented to reflect the alchemical silver of the moon. It's a false reflection of wealth and value. It's a dead, dense form of exchanging with humans. And it always robs people. Money has never been something that's built upon itself. It's always devalued over time and been a way to rob people. And it's always represented the currency of sin, as what I meant to say. And so we were born under the influence of sin. And that's a pretty heavy influence because it lifts oceans, right? We know that the moon lifts oceans. And so, and we know the Africans wouldn't go to sleep in the moonlight because they thought they'd wake up insane. Nobody's ever associated the moon's influence with anything other than something like sin. And so there's something very wicked about that object that doesn't belong there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Food for the moon.
Yeah, food for the moon. Yeah.
That's what Tricia said.
It's working with Saturn somehow is what the ancients say. I don't know exactly what it all means, but the moon and Saturn, like David Icke says, there's definitely something to it. And if you don't believe in what I've said about the connection between microbial behavior, demons, and the moon, please go look up when microbes are most active in the bloodstream, and you'll find out that they operate with the full moon cycles.
Interesting.
So if you're going to do a parasite cleanse and go slaying demons, that's when you do it.
Okay, good advice. Appreciate it. I think I saw one here from Void ZZ. Thanks for the super chat and the support. Thank you, Miguel, the entire team, and the guests. Love your guys. Your convo keeps me going through the evening shift. We are happy to keep you company, even when it's an intense, but I see all of this is good news. Certainly what Nicholas is bringing is good news. No doubt about it. Well, as we get to the end, anything else you want to say, or do you have a website, or where do you want to send people? Where do you want to send people? And yeah, and unlike Sam, we'd love to have you back. So
thanks, guys. I have a YouTube channel called Jesuit Slayer, all pushed together, no spaces. At Jesuit Slayer, you can find cartoons if you're not interested in theses and books. I've literally made cartoons explaining every aspect of this, 50-something videos. Please complain. I need to build the next book, and I need to know where the interest is on what I should talk about or where I should go next. And then you can go to my Facebook, Jesuit Slayer on YouTube. And then of course I'm on every ebook platform. Christ is Belial, the fraud that reset time. And my pen name is in dedication to my grandfather, Edmund G. Love, a famous writer who you can look up if you care. And so I decided to go with Nicholas G. Love for that reason, not because I'm hiding. And lastly, I want to tell you guys that my next book is going to include something that I didn't talk about in this one, and that's the story of 153 fish. That story was fake, but I've been trying to figure out why it's there. We know it's fake because Peter was a vegan. We know Peter was a vegan because of the Clementine homilies and because of other statements in the Bible before that part in the timeline. But apparently when Jesus shows up right after the resurrection, they all have a fish fry together. But then months later or years later, Peter has an epiphany where a tablecloth comes down from heaven and shows him that all the animals are clean now, and he stops being vegan. But that happened after the fish fry. That's how we know that the story is fake. That also knows how, one of the reasons that we know that they're using meat as a biological warfare instrument in our gut. But the reason I told you all that is because the 153 fish story is tied to an incredible mathematical principle that has to do with the Fibonacci sequence and the 144,000. So the 144,000 resurrected zombies, that's the goal, right? Getting your old body back. What soul would want their old shoes back, right? But that's right. What they're painting as the goal. If only 144,000 are going to make it into the VIP club. But that number 144 is a combination of a 66 and 77 fraction. 66 and a 66 and a third and 77 and 2/3, which are the numbers of Baal, and Belial. When you put them together, you get 144. And then if you add the 9 for the soul, you get 153. The 144, the believers, the 9 represents the soul of the unbeliever. And the net that Jesus cast to capture 153 represents a curling in the Fibonacci sequence of the 17th integer of 9, because there's 16 clean 9s in a 144 number. But when you add the 17th, it gets chaotic. That represents the unbeliever. That represents the Pythagorean representation of the soul and the aspect of the Fibonacci sequence that the builders could never square. And so because they couldn't square the soul, square the mind, they could square the 12 clusters of the brain into 144, but they couldn't square the soul that's seated above it. So they cast out the chief cornerstone and they went with the 144. But Belial casts a net for 153 so that he gets the believers and the unbelievers in common. And that's what the believer and the unbeliever has in common in 2 Corinthians 6, chapter 15. I didn't put that in the book, but I'm going to bounce that idea off of a bunch of people that want to research the math on 153 and see how it's a soul harvesting trap. Anyway.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for listening, guys. I'm sorry if I put you to sleep.
No. The chat room's been on fire. People are engaged. Yeah, a lot of people like what you're doing. Of course, there are detractors, but that's just the way the internet's work, and we have to have this dialogue and tweak things as we go. But I feel what you're saying is more true than people will realize. But we better wrap it up. And yeah, for the audience, we'll have the mini bonus podcast if you're on Patreon or any of those, where we give a summary, which is always great to really catch up and get the whole feel of the guest research. So please join Patreon or support it in any way you can. I do take crypto. Let's keep this a Red Pill Cafeteria going, and other great shows coming. We'll be doing a show on Japanese shamanism and Shinto on Friday. And yeah, more good shows coming, but we better end this. Vance, thanks for keeping us company as always.
Okay. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, I guess. So a lot of food for thought and food for the moon.
Food for the moon.
Guys, you can find my book on gumshoe.com is the best place to find it cleanly, but it's also on the other providers. Thank you so much, Miguel. Thanks.
Oh, man, it's great having you on. Yeah, and thanks for that super chat to Egypt. And yes, Nicholas, thanks for coming on, and good luck with everything. And we look forward to the next time. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Have a great night.
All right. For everybody else, take care, and we will see you soon. And write your own gospel, live your own myth. Take care.